So before we get into this video, let me just make it clear that I'm not trying to upset anyone. Language teachers are obviously doing their best to teach well, and of course they want their students to learn. However, just like with everything else in life, it's very easy to fall into bad habits once in a while. And you might be surprised to learn that some common teaching habits might be holding you back. Hi guys, welcome to the channel. I'm Qasim and I studied Arabic and Persian at Cambridge and I've learned multiple foreign languages. In this video, I'm going to talk about 3 habits I've noticed that some language teachers have that can actually hinder your learning. If you feel like you're not learning as effectively as you should be, these 3 habits might be why. So the first habit is saying the incorrect version before the correct one. Imagine I'm teaching you the word fruit. If I say, don't say fruit, that's wrong. What you have to say is fruit. What do you think will stick? Most likely the one you'll remember will be fruit because I said it first and I emphasized it. And unfortunately, there are a lot of language teachers doing this. To a native speaker or someone whose English is very solid, fruit sounds quite funny and seems like quite a harmless little joke because it's so obviously wrong. Except if you're a learner who's never heard that word before, that pronunciation will stick in your head and it will sound right because you've heard the teacher say it that way. But it might not be something you would have ever thought of if you'd only heard the correct version of the pronunciation. Saying something incorrectly before saying what's actually right is a habit that a lot of language teachers have. They'll say, don't say blah, blah, blah. That's wrong. Say this instead. The problem with that is that your brain often doesn't remember which one's the right one and which one's the wrong one. Let's suppose you've just started learning English and I'm your teacher. I might say, remember, it's not lamb like lamp, it's lamb with a silent B. You might start associating lamb with lamp, which makes no sense and just causes unnecessary cognitive load. The correct pronunciation, lamb, could get confused with the incorrect but pretty similar sounding word lamp. And this doesn't go just for pronunciation. Some teachers might even write out something that's wrong and say it out loud to reinforce it, like grammar or something. Then they'll just cross it out and say, this is wrong, the right way is whatever. The key takeaway here is that I think this can cause multiple issues for students where they get confused. They can make incorrect associations with other similar but completely unrelated words, or they can get completely confused by the pronunciation or even grammar. This brings me on to the second habit, which is creating misleading associations. When I was about 4 or 5 years old, I went to a few after-school French classes. And one day the teacher was teaching us the word poisson, which means fish. She waved her hands in a little swimming motion and she said, remember, it's like a croissant, but it's a poisson. Now, I knew what a croissant was. We sometimes had them for breakfast at weekends. But what do you think happened the next time I ate a croissant for breakfast? That's right, I called it a poisson. And I'm just a kid, right? Now, my French teacher meant well and probably thought she was being creative. But what she'd actually done was confuse me. She had associated things in my head that weren't meant to be linked at all, and then had to work out a strategy for remembering which one was a croissant and which one was a poisson, a completely unnecessary extra step that my brain would have had to take until those words lodged in my head the right way round. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, finding associations with things as you're learning can be really useful. And I actually love that technique myself, especially for vocab learning. But you have to create the links in your brain to go from one word to the other. I think a lot of time when teachers are using this kind of method, it's really easy to be caught off guard as a student and just end up confused. So that's another thing to watch out for. Misleading associations can create unnecessary confusion. Now, habit number 3 is breaking words down into syllables. On the face of it, breaking words down sounds like a good thing. It's a method we learnt in school, in England at least, to make spellings easier to remember. So, for example, the word altogether. We learnt how to spell it by breaking it down to all to get her. Or the word environment, for example, can be broken down to environment. If you're a native speaker and the correct pronunciation is already embedded in your brain, then dividing a word into syllables is an effective way to approach spelling. But for someone learning a second language, it can cause a lot of problems. So let's suppose again that you're a beginner in English and I'm teaching you a new word, history. I'm going to make it easier for you to remember by breaking it down to hear story. Hear story. Can you hear what happened? The stress has ended up on a different syllable. And then when you say to someone, I'm reading a his story book, they'll say, what? A storybook? Whose story? Even if you struggle to pronounce the letter H and you say history, as some French speakers do, or you say history, as some Spanish speakers might say, native English speakers will still understand you. What they won't immediately understand is if you stress a different part of the word. Here's another example, comfortable. If I'm a teacher, I say I'm going to make it easier for you to remember by breaking it down to come comfortable. Comfortable. And can you hear what happened again? The stress has ended up on the wrong syllable. And then when you say to someone, this chair is really comfortable, they won't be confused, but it's just incorrect pronunciation. And it's not necessary considering no one would ever pronounce it like that. It's more like comfortable, right? And I'm giving examples in English because everyone watching this video is likely to be familiar with English. But I think the principle applies to any language where certain syllables are stressed. When breaking a word down into syllables to help with pronunciation, I think you have to be careful to maintain the correct stress or students will end up saying words wrong. Sometimes so wrong that native speakers won't even be able to understand them. Anyway, these are just some things I think about to watch out for. If you guys have any anecdotes or examples to share, I'd love to read them in the comments. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, you might want to consider subscribing to the channel. In which case, I'll see you in the next one.